Marquis was 39 years old, and according to the woman he had been married to for 6 years, a failure. He made what Alicia called a respectable salary as a senior data analyst for a mid-sized property management firm, somewhere in the low 6 figures. It was enough to afford the mortgage on their beautiful, if slightly dated, $2.5 million home on the slopes of Camelback Mountain in Phoenix. It was enough for her leased white Porsche Macan, an $80,000 vehicle she treated like a disposable accessory. It was enough for her quarterly shopping sprees that routinely crested 5 figures, for the $2,400 Burberry dresses she wore once, and the $1,200 Christian Louboutin heels that pinched her feet but looked good on her social media. It was enough, but it was never enough for her. For Marquis, a tall, broad-shouldered black man with kind eyes and a quiet demeanor, it was all a carefully constructed stage. His real life happened in a sleek glass tower in downtown Phoenix, in an office with his name on it, Marquis Washington, founder and CEO, Phoenix Saguaro Holdings. His net worth wasn't the $120,000 a year Alicia believed it to be. It was a closely guarded $14 million built over 15 years of shrewd, high-risk, high-reward property development. The mid-size firm he worked for was his own. The Camelback house wasn't mortgaged. It was one of dozens of properties Saguaro Holdings owned outright. And his salary wasn't a salary at all. It was a modest personal draw from a vast and growing empire. He had kept this secret for a reason. When he met Alicia, he had already been burned once, a former partner who saw him only as a dollar sign. With Alicia, he wanted to be loved for himself. He presented himself as a simple man of simple means, a man who found joy in a well-made spreadsheet and a quiet evening at home. He thought for a time that it had worked. He thought she loved Marquis the analyst, the man who wore a $89 Timex watch and drove a 10-year-old Honda Accord because it was reliable. He had never been more wrong. The devastating truth had unspooled slowly, then all at once. And it had all led to this moment, on a Friday evening at 6:15 p.m., the desert sun casting long, unforgiving shadows across their travertine patio. "I want you out, Marquis," Alicia said. Her voice was as cold and sharp as broken glass. She was standing by the infinity pool, a glass of $300 Chardonnay in her hand, her silhouette framed against the bruised purple and orange of the Phoenix sunset. Tonight, Marquis stood by the open glass doors, a reusable grocery bag in his hand. He had just gotten home from the office, his real office, and had stopped to pick up the organic kale and wild-caught salmon she had requested via text. "Out? Alicia, what are you talking about?" She laughed, a short, ugly sound that held no humor. "Don't play dumb. It's pathetic. This isn't working. It hasn't been working for years. I'm done pretending." She took a delicate sip of her wine. "I've spoken to a lawyer. This house is in my name. We both know my father helped with the down payment. The courts will see that. You and your little analyst salary, you can't afford to fight me." She gestured vaguely at the opulent surroundings. "This is my life. You were just a placeholder." Every word was a perfectly calibrated dart designed to wound. She had no idea how wrong she was about every single fact, yet the intent was clear. This was the culmination of years of quiet contempt, of 1,000 tiny cuts. "So you want me to just leave?" "With what?" he asked, his voice deliberately soft, playing the part she had cast for him. She set her wine glass down on a marble-top table with a sharp click. "That's your problem. You have your clothes, your sad little car. I'm being generous by not having the locks changed already." She smirked, a cruel twist of her lips. "Good luck being homeless, Marquis." It was the line she had been waiting to deliver, the final crushing blow. He could see the triumph in her eyes. She saw him as a man with nothing, a man she was discarding like an old pair of shoes. The humiliation she intended for him was a thick, suffocating blanket, but underneath it, Marquis felt a strange, cold calm. He felt nothing. The love he'd once felt had been eroded long ago, replaced by a grim, patient resolve. He had known this day was coming. He had been planning for it for months. He slowly set the grocery bag on the kitchen island. He reached into the pocket of his simple navy blue slacks, the kind a data analyst would wear. His fingers closed around a cool, heavy piece of metal and plastic. It was not the key to his Honda Accord. He pulled it out and tossed it gently onto the $15,000 granite countertop. It landed with a solid, definitive thud. It was a fob, sleek and black, bearing the logo of a bespoke security firm that serviced only the most exclusive properties in Paradise Valley. Beside it, he placed a single, newly cut brass key. Alicia stared at the fob, her brow furrowed in confusion. "What's that?" Marquis looked at her, his expression unreadable. He had imagined this moment 100 times, and in every version, he was calm. He was still. He was in control. "Those," he said, his voice even and low, "are the keys to my house." She scoffed. "Your house? What are you talking about? You're going to a motel." "No," he said, "I'm going home." He paused, letting the silence stretch. "To my new home, the $4 million one, in Paradise Valley, the one I paid for in cash 3 weeks ago." He gestured to the key fob. "These are mine. As for you," he continued, his voice dropping even further, becoming devastatingly quiet, "you get yours. We have a prenuptial agreement, remember? You get half of all marital assets." He let that hang in the air for a beat, which amounts to half of the $12,450 in our joint checking account. Half of nothing. Her face, so full of smug satisfaction just moments before, went utterly white. The transformation was breathtaking. It was the face of a person watching her entire world dissolve into smoke right before her eyes. What does a person do when the reality they've built their entire life around is revealed to be a complete lie? If you've ever seen someone's world crumble in an instant, let us know in the comments what that moment of realization looked like. Marquis was about to find out. He didn't wait for her to speak. He turned, walked out the front door without a backward glance, and got into his waiting truck. Not the Honda, but the new black $95,000 Ford F-150 Raptor he'd parked down the street. He left the groceries on the counter. He left his old life behind. He was driving toward the sunset, toward a mansion with a view, toward his real life. And on Monday morning, his lawyer, David Chen, would file the papers. The facade was over. The consequences were just beginning. The facade had been a masterpiece of domestic normalcy, constructed over 6 years with meticulous, dollar-tag details. Their life in the Camelback House was a play, and Marquis had been both lead actor and unwitting producer, funding a production he was meant to be the villain of. The normalcy was what made the betrayal so profound. It was built in the quiet moments, in the space between heartbeats. A typical Saturday morning began with the sound of Alicia's Nespresso machine, a $650 model that hissed and whirred, producing a single shot of espresso from a $1.25 pod. She'd sip it from a $90 Royal Doulton mug while scrolling through her phone, her thumb flicking past images of lives even more luxurious than the one she was aspiring to. Marquis, meanwhile, would be making coffee in their old $45 Mr. Coffee drip machine, the kind he'd had since before they met. "Are you ever going to get rid of that hideous thing?" she'd ask, not looking up from her screen. "It's an eyesore. It makes the whole kitchen look cheap." "It makes good coffee," Marquis would reply, his voice gentle. He was wearing a faded Howard University sweatshirt and a pair of worn gray sweatpants. "It makes diner coffee. We have a $15,000 kitchen renovation, and that thing is sitting on the counter like a cockroach. She'd sigh, a long-suffering sound. Honestly, Marquis, you have no sense of aesthetics. He never told her that the diner coffee he was drinking was a rare, single-origin Ethiopian blend that cost $70 a pound, sourced by his personal assistant. He just smiled and poured himself a cup in a plain ceramic mug. The contrast was a constant, quiet hum beneath the surface of their lives. Her visible, branded luxury versus his invisible, quiet quality. Their closets were another stage for this play. Hers was a walk-in temple to consumerism, meticulously organized by color and designer. Racks of Chanel, Gucci, and Prada. A wall of shoes, with the signature red soles of Christian Louboutins, $1,200 a pair, arranged in a neat blood-red line. On a velvet pedestal sat her prized possession, a Himalayan Birkin bag, a $25,000 gift she had wheedled out of him for their 5th anniversary, telling him it was an investment piece. He'd agreed, transferring the money into their joint account and letting her make the purchase. Watching her tell her friends she'd saved up for it herself. His closet, by contrast, was sparse. A row of identical, off-the-rack $300 Joseph A. Bank suits for his analyst job, a few pairs of comfortable jeans, a collection of well-worn sneakers. He owned one truly expensive suit, a custom-tailored $9,000 Tom Ford creation, but it hung in a garment bag in the back of his office closet downtown, worn only to the highest-level meetings where appearance was part of the negotiation. To Alicia, his wardrobe was just another piece of evidence in the case she was building against him, the case of his utter, irredeemable mediocrity. "My friend's husband just made partner at his law firm," she'd say over a dinner of flavorless grilled chicken and steamed asparagus, her idea of a healthy meal. "He just bought her a new Range Rover, the autobiography edition. It's $150,000. She'd poke at her food. "Must be nice." "That's great for them," Marquise would say, chewing his own food thoughtfully. "It's not about being great for them, Marquise. It's about ambition. It's about drive. Do you have any? You've been a senior analyst for 5 years now? Is there no next step? Are you just going to analyze data until you retire?" He knew what she was doing. She was chipping away at his confidence, trying to make him feel small so her decision to eventually leave him would feel justified. He let her. He absorbed the insults, the condescension, the endless comparisons. Each one was a small, sharp stone he tucked away. He was building something too, not a case against her, but a fortress for himself. He had no idea just how soon he would need it. This was the life he paid for, a life where he was perpetually underestimated. And for a long time, he thought that was the price of being loved for the right reasons. He was paying for a lie, and the cost was his own dignity. The betrayal escalated in scenes, each one more cruel than the last, accumulating like pressure behind a dam. The outrage wasn't a single event. It was a slow, creeping poison that had seeped into every corner of their marriage. The first major crack appeared at a dinner party they hosted. It was for Alicia's friends, a circle of women who measured their worth in carats and square footage. The air in their dining room was thick with expensive perfume and the low hum of competitive chatter. The table was set with $400 per setting Cristofel silverware, another purchase Alicia had insisted was essential. Marquis, playing the role of the dutiful, slightly awkward husband, was helping to serve wine. He moved with a quiet grace, his large frame navigating the crowded room with ease. His deep brown skin seemed to glow under the warm light of the $5,000 chandelier Alicia had picked out. "Marquise, darling, be a dear and top me up," said a woman named Tiffany, holding her glass out without looking at him. Her husband, a plastic surgeon, was bragging about his new boat. As Marquis poured the $150 bottle of Cabernet, Tiffany turned to Alicia. "So, Alicia, what does your husband do again? Some kind of computer thing, right?" Alicia let out a little laugh, a tinkling sound that set Marquis' teeth on edge. "He's a data analyst. He makes spreadsheets. Very important, I'm sure?" She waved a dismissive hand, her diamond bracelet catching the light. "He's very stable." The word hung in the air, dripping with condescension. In their world, stable was an insult. It meant boring, unambitious, safe. It meant a man who couldn't afford the life they all felt they deserved. Marquis felt a dozen pairs of eyes flicker toward him, filled with a mixture of pity and contempt. He felt his face grow warm, but he kept his expression neutral. He finished pouring the wine and retreated to the kitchen, the sound of their laughter following him. He leaned against the cold stainless steel of the Sub-Zero refrigerator, a $12,000 appliance he'd paid for, and took a slow, deep breath. He heard Alicia's voice drift in from the other room. "No, he's sweet, but it's not a forever thing. A girl's got to have a plan." That was the moment he knew. It wasn't just dissatisfaction, it was a strategy. He was a stepping stone, a comfortable stopover on her way to the life she truly wanted, and she was openly workshopping his dismissal with her friends. He felt a cold knot tighten in his stomach. The love he had been so carefully guarding, trying to nurture in the arid soil of their marriage, withered and died in that instant. It was replaced by something else, a cold, hard clarity. The cruelty became more direct in the months that followed. One afternoon, he came home to find her in the driveway, standing beside her Porsche Macan and his Honda Accord. She was on the phone, speaking in a loud, performative voice. "I know, it's just embarrassing," she said, presumably to one of her friends. "I have to park my car next to that." She gestured at his Honda. "It's a 2015. It has 187,000 miles on it. It practically screams, 'I've given up on life.' I've asked him to at least park it on the street, but he says it's more convenient here." "Convenient for who? It's ruining the whole curb appeal." Marquis stopped at the edge of the driveway, hidden by the shade of a Palo Verde tree. He just listened. "No, I can't get him to buy a new one. He says it's fiscally irresponsible." Can you believe that? Fiscally irresponsible. Meanwhile, I'm driving a leased car because he said we couldn't afford to buy it outright. My God, I cannot wait to have my own garage, with my own cars in it. He backed away silently and walked around the block, his heart pounding a slow, heavy rhythm against his ribs. It wasn't about the car. It was about the public humiliation. She wanted him to hear it. She was turning up the pressure, trying to make him so miserable that he would be the one to leave, or to make her own eventual departure seem like an act of mercy. The final, most devastating scene before the end happened in their bedroom. He was reading in bed a biography of a city planner he admired. Alicia came in from her dressing room wearing a silk robe that probably cost more than his monthly car payment would have. She was holding a brochure for a real estate agency. "Look at this," she said, tossing it onto the bed. It was open to a spread of a massive, ultra-modern mansion in Paradise Valley. The price was listed at the bottom, $8.9 million. "It's nice," Marquis said, his eyes still on his book. "Nice? Marquis, it's spectacular. This is the kind of house I was born to live in." She sat on the edge of the bed, facing away from him. "I drove by it today. There's an open house next weekend. I think I'm going to go." "We can't afford a house like that, Alicia." She turned to him, her eyes flashing. "You can't afford a house like that. Don't lump me in with your financial limitations." She stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the glittering lights of the city. "My lawyer says that in a divorce, I'd be entitled to the primary residence, especially given my father's contribution. And with the equity in this place, she trailed off, a little smile playing on her lips. I'll be fine. More than fine. I'll be able to get a place like that. Maybe not that exact one, but something close. He put his book down. The dam of his patience was beginning to crack. And what about me? He asked, his voice dangerously quiet. She finally looked at him, and her expression was one of genuine, stunning indifference. It was the look you'd give a stranger on the street, a piece of furniture you were about to replace. You? She said, as if the thought had never occurred to her. I don't know, Marquis. You'll land on your feet. You're resourceful. You'll probably find a nice little one-bedroom apartment in Scottsdale, something you can actually afford. She said it with no malice. It was worse than malice. It was a simple statement of fact, as she saw it. He was an obstacle to be removed, a calculation in her plan. In her mind, his future was a settled matter, a small, sad footnote in the grand story of her life. He looked at the woman he had once loved, the woman he had built a secret life to protect himself from, and realized he was looking at a complete stranger. The outrage was no longer a dull ache. It was a white-hot fire. But he didn't let it show. He just nodded, picked up his book, and pretended to read. But he wasn't reading. He was planning. The plan began to crystallize. The Monday after the dinner party, Marquis knew he couldn't continue living in a state of suspended animation, waiting for the axe to fall. He had to move from a defensive posture to an offensive one, not for revenge, but for self-preservation. His strategic restraint, born of a desire to be loved for himself, now transformed into a tool for a clean, decisive exit. He started playing dumb on a whole new level. While Alicia saw him as a man passively accepting his fate, he was quietly moving pieces around a chessboard only he could see. He started leaving work at 5 p.m. on the dot, reinforcing her image of him as an uninspired 9-to-5er. He'd come home, make dinner, and ask about her day, listening with feigned interest as she described lunches with friends at the $200 per person Toca Madera or her latest find at the luxury boutiques in Scottsdale Fashion Square. One evening, she came home glowing, having just put a deposit down on a custom-made sofa from Roche-Beaubois, a vibrant, artistic piece that cost $22,000. It's going to completely transform the living room, she announced, showing him a picture on her phone. We can finally get rid of that ugly brown leather thing you love so much. The ugly brown leather thing was a comfortable, well-made sofa he'd bought years ago. That's a big purchase, Alicia, he said, his voice carefully neutral, projecting the mild anxiety of a man who worries about credit card balances. Did we budget for that? She rolled her eyes. Oh, please. Don't be so dramatic. I put it on the Amex. We'll pay it off. Or, it'll get sorted out later. The implication was clear. It would be his problem, a debt she would leave behind along with him. Okay, he said, nodding slowly. If you think it's best. He was the picture of a defeated husband. Inside he was making a note. The American Express card was a corporate card for Saguaro Holdings, issued in her name for household expenses. He made a mental note to have his CFO, a sharp woman named Maria, ready to cancel it on his signal. Each lie she told, each presumptuous purchase she made, was another piece of evidence he gathered, another nail she was hammering into the coffin of the life she thought she was securing. He began having quiet, off-the-books meetings. The first was with his lawyer, David Chen, a man whose unassuming demeanor belied a mind as sharp as a surgeon's scalpel. They met not in David's high-rise office, but in a small, nondescript coffee shop in a working-class neighborhood in Glendale, far from Alicia's usual haunts. David's billing rate was $1,500 an hour, but he was a friend first and he listened intently, his expression growing grimmer with each detail Marquis shared. "The prenup is ironclad, Marquise," David said, tapping a finger on the document he'd brought in a plain manila envelope. "We drafted it that way for a reason. Saguaro Holdings and all its assets, tangible and intangible, acquired before or during the marriage, are your sole and separate property. Full stop." "And the house?" Marquis asked. "The Camelback property is owned by 123 Mountain View LLC, which is a subsidiary of Saguaro Holdings. She's not on the title. She's not on the LLC. She's a tenant, a non-paying tenant, but a tenant nonetheless." "So her father's down payment?" David smiled faintly. "You mean the $100,000 check he wrote to her as a wedding gift, which she then deposited into your joint account, which you then used as part of the operating capital to acquire the property through your own company? It's untraceable as a direct investment in the property itself. It's marital property that was spent. She has no claim." Marquis felt a wave of relief, followed by a pang of sadness for the man he had been 6 years ago, the man who had hoped this document would be nothing more than a forgotten piece of paper in a safe deposit box. "So what is she entitled to?" Marquis asked. "Half of all assets held in joint names, the joint checking account, the joint savings. That's it. And half of any debt accrued in both your names. But you've been too smart to have any of that." David leaned forward. "Marquise, she's going to walk away with next to nothing. You know that, right? This is going to be a shock." "I know," Marquis said quietly. "She's made her choices, David. I'm just accepting them." His next meeting was with a real estate agent, Imani, a vibrant black woman with a reputation for discretion and an encyclopedic knowledge of Paradise Valley. He told her what he was looking for: privacy, security, a view, and something that was the complete opposite of the life he was living. Something that was authentically his. "I want a fortress, Imani," he told her as they stood on a dusty lot with a half-finished structure on it, but one with a soul. She found it a week later. A stunning, single-story contemporary mansion nestled high on the north side of Mummy Mountain. It was all clean lines, glass walls, and warm, organic materials. It had an infinity pool that seemed to spill directly into the valley below, a state-of-the-art gym, a library with floor-to-ceiling walnut shelves, and a 4-car garage. The price was $4.2 million. The owner is a tech founder who has to relocate to Singapore. He wants a quick, quiet, all-cash sale, Imani said. He's motivated. Marquis walked through the empty rooms, the sound of his footsteps echoing in the vast space. He stood in front of the massive wall of glass in the great room, looking out at the panoramic view. In the distance, he could see the familiar silhouette of Camelback Mountain. He could see the very slope where his current house stood, a monument to a life that was not his own. From here it looked so small, so insignificant. He turned to Imani, a slow smile spreading across his face for the first time in months. "Make him an offer, $4 million, all cash, close in 2 weeks." While Alicia was picking out sofas and planning her triumphant new life, Marquis was signing closing documents, arranging for movers to transfer the contents of his real office and his personal effects from a storage unit, and choosing furniture that he actually liked. He was building his new reality, all while playing the part of the oblivious, downtrodden husband. The tension was immense, a constant, crushing weight. He felt like a spy in his own home, every word a lie, every gesture a piece of misdirection. But with each passing day, his resolve hardened. He was no longer a victim. He was a strategist. And his final move was just around the corner. The strategic planning phase was methodical and silent, a series of moves made in the shadows while his life in the light continued its charade. It was in these weeks that Marquis reclaimed his power, not through confrontation but through quiet, decisive action. His days were a study in duality. From 9 to 5 he was Marquis Washington, the data analyst, performing his role with a convincing air of weary competence. But before and after those hours, he was the CEO of Saguaro Holdings, orchestrating the end of one life and the beginning of another. His first call after meeting with his lawyer was to Maria, his CFO. They met in his real office, a corner suite on the 30th floor of the Saguaro Tower, with panoramic views of the entire valley. The office was a reflection of his true self, minimalist, functional, with an undercurrent of sophisticated taste. A large abstract painting by a local artist dominated one wall, its vibrant colors a stark contrast to the muted beiges of the Camelback house. "Maria," he said, getting straight to the point, "I need a full accounting of every expense Alicia has charged to the corporate Amex for the past 24 months. Maria, a woman in her 50s with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense attitude, didn't flinch. She'd been with Marquis since the beginning and knew more about his personal life than anyone. She simply nodded and tapped a few keys on her tablet. "I have it ready. I run the report weekly, just in case." She slid the tablet across the polished mahogany desk. Total comes to $482,119.67. That includes the lease on the Porsche, which is under the company's name. Marquis scanned the itemized list. Designer clothes, spa treatments, lavish dinners, a $15,000 donation to a charity gala, where she was photographed for the society pages, the $22,000 deposit for the Roche-Beaubois sofa. It was a document of breathtaking entitlement. "I'm going to be filing for divorce," he said, his voice flat. "The moment I give the word, I need you to do 3 things. 1. Cancel her card. 2. Initiate the repossession of the Porsche. The lease agreement is with the company. She has no claim to it. 3. Transfer all but $12,500 out of our joint checking account into a new sole signatory account for the company. The prenup entitles her to half of the marital assets, and that account is the only one." Maria's expression softened for a fraction of a second. "I'm sorry to hear that, Marquis, but I understand." She made a few notes. "Consider it done. You just give me the day and time." "It will be a Friday evening," Marquis said. "I'll text you." Next came the evidence compilation. David had advised him to document everything. Marquis started a private journal on a secure server. He logged the insults, the condescending remarks, the open discussions of her plans to leave him. He saved screenshots of her social media posts, where she flaunted a lifestyle far beyond the means of a data analyst's wife, often with captions like "living the life I deserve" or "manifesting my dream." He even made a recording. It was a desperate measure, one that felt distasteful. But David had insisted it might be necessary if she tried to contest the prenup by claiming emotional abuse or duress. One evening, she was particularly cruel. He had just come home, and she was furious that he had forgotten to pick up a specific brand of imported sparkling water she liked. "Is it that hard?" she'd shrieked, her voice echoing in the large, empty-feeling house. "I ask you to do one simple thing. One. But you can't even manage that. My God, you are useless. Completely and utterly useless. I don't know why I've put up with it this long. This is not a partnership. This is me dragging your dead weight through my life." He had his phone in his pocket, its voice memo app silently recording. He didn't say a word. He just stood there and took it. Listening to the recording later that night in his car, the cold, venomous rage in her voice was even more shocking than it had been in person. He saved the file, labeled it Evidence Item 7, and hoped he would never have to use it. The final piece of his strategic plan was the most important: securing his new life. He closed on the Paradise Valley mansion on a Tuesday, 3 weeks before the final confrontation. The entire transaction was handled through a trust, managed by David Chen's law firm, ensuring his name appeared nowhere on the public documents. The $4 million was transferred from one of Saguaro Holdings' investment accounts. The day after closing, he walked through the empty house with Imani. It smelled of fresh paint and new beginnings. Sunlight streamed through the vast windows, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air. "It's a beautiful home, Marquise," Imani said softly. "You're going to be happy here." "It's a start," he said, his gaze fixed on the view. He could see the city spread out before him, a map of his past and future. He had spent so long living a divided life, a life of secrets and compromises. He felt a deep, profound yearning for it to be over. He wanted to live in this house, not as an escape, but as his reality. He wanted to wake up in the morning and not have to put on a costume. He spent the next 2 weeks furnishing the house, working with the designer Imani had recommended. He chose every piece himself: a massive, comfortable sofa in a warm gray fabric, a solid oak dining table that could seat 12, a state-of-the-art sound system. He filled the library shelves with his favorite books. He stocked the wine cellar. He had his Tom Ford suit and the rest of his real wardrobe moved from his office into the sprawling master closet. By the Thursday before the confrontation, it was done. The house was no longer an empty structure. It was a home. His home. That evening, he sat by the pool, the water glowing a serene blue, the stars beginning to appear in the vast desert sky. He held the sleek, heavy key fob in his hand. Everything was in place. All the pieces were on the board. He had absorbed the insults, endured the humiliation, and turned his pain into a meticulously executed plan. He felt no joy, no thirst for revenge. Just a grim, quiet satisfaction. He was ready. All he had to do was wait for her to make the final move. The discovery, when it came, was not a discovery for Marquis, but for Alicia. For him, it was the end of a long, painful chapter. For her, it was the sudden, shocking revelation that the book she thought she was writing had a completely different author. It was Friday, 6:03 p.m. The air was hot and still, the way it always is in Phoenix, before the sun finally gives up its fight. Marquis pulled his 10-year-old Honda Accord into the garage of the Camelback house for the last time. The sound of the engine shutting off felt final, definitive. He grabbed the reusable grocery bag from the passenger seat. Inside was the organic kale, the wild-caught salmon, and a bottle of the cheap Pinot Grigio she liked. It was the last prop for his last performance. He walked into the house through the garage entrance, into the laundry room. He could hear the faint strains of some vapid pop music coming from the patio. He walked through the kitchen, the cool marble under his feet, a familiar sensation he knew he would not feel again. And there she was. She was posed by the infinity pool, a vision in a white linen dress that had probably cost $800. Her deep brown skin was luminous against the fabric, her hair styled in elegant twists that framed her face. She was the picture of effortless wealth, a portrait she had carefully cultivated. She held a wine glass, her posture radiating a tense, excited energy. She was ready. "We need to talk," she said, her voice tight. Marquis feigned surprise. "Okay, I was just about to start dinner." He placed the grocery bag on the island. "Forget dinner," she snapped. "I'm not hungry." She turned to face him fully, and her carefully constructed mask of civility fell away, revealing the raw contempt beneath. "I want you out, Marquise. Tonight." The words, though expected, still landed with a thud. He watched her, studying her face. He saw the flicker of triumph in her eyes, the slight, cruel curl of her lip. She was enjoying this. This was her moment of victory. "Out? Alicia, what are you talking about?" he asked. His voice was calm, betraying none of the turmoil he had lived with for months. He had to play his part to the very end. Her laugh was a harsh, ugly bark. "Don't play dumb. It's pathetic. This isn't working. It hasn't been working for years. I'm done pretending." She took a deliberate, theatrical sip of her wine. "I've spoken to a lawyer. This house is in my name. We both know my father helped with the down payment. The courts will see that. You and your little analyst salary, you can't afford to fight me." He let the lies wash over him. The house wasn't in her name. Her father's gift had been absorbed and spent 6 years ago. His salary was a fiction. But he let her have her moment, let her lay all her cards on the table. "This is my life," she said, sweeping her arm to encompass the pool, the view, the house. "You were just a placeholder." "A placeholder," he repeated, the words tasting like ash in his mouth. "So you want me to just leave?" "With what?" he asked, sticking to the script he knew she expected. He needed to see how far she would push it. She set her glass down with a sharp click. The sound echoed in the sudden silence. "That's your problem. You have your clothes, your sad little car." She walked towards him, her eyes hard. She stopped a few feet away, her gaze sweeping over him, from his simple button-down shirt to his worn leather shoes. It was a look of pure dismissal. "I'm being generous by not having the locks changed already." She paused, saving her final, most venomous line for last. A smirk played on her lips. "Good luck being homeless, Marcus." There it was. The final outrage. The ultimate expression of her contempt. She saw him as nothing, a piece of trash, to be thrown out onto the street. And in that moment, all the pain, all the humiliation, all the cold fury he had suppressed for so long coalesced into a single point of absolute stillness. The actor left the stage. Marquis Washington, the CEO, the developer, the man who had built an empire from nothing, was all that remained. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't argue. He didn't defend himself. He simply looked at her, his eyes holding hers, and he let the silence stretch. He let her bask in her perceived victory for 5 long, agonizing seconds. He watched the smug certainty on her face, and he prepared to shatter it into 1,000,000 pieces. The discovery was all hers, and it was about to be brutal. The strike was not a thunderclap, but the silent, deadly slide of a guillotine blade. It began the moment her final insult, "Good luck being homeless," finished echoing in the cavernous space of their kitchen. Marquis's posture didn't change. His expression remained a mask of calm. But something in the air shifted. The oppressive heat of her victory suddenly felt like a cold dread. He slowly, deliberately, reached into the pocket of his navy slacks. It was a simple movement, but it was filled with an unbearable weight. Alicia watched, a flicker of confusion crossing her face. She expected him to plead, to argue, to show some sign of desperation. This quiet, controlled action was not in her script. His fingers closed around the cool, heavy fob of the Paradise Valley mansion. He pulled it out. The black plastic and brushed metal felt solid and real in his palm. He tossed it onto the $15,000 granite countertop. It didn't clatter. It landed with a dense, authoritative thud. It was the sound of a new fact entering the world. Alongside it, he placed the single, gleaming brass key to the front door. Alicia stared at the objects, her head tilted. The confident smirk wavered. "What's that?" she asked, her voice losing some of its sharp edge. Marquis met her gaze. The time for playing a part was over. "Those," he said, his voice a low, even baritone that carried the weight of absolute truth, "are the keys to my house." She let out a short, nervous laugh. "Your house? What are you talking about? Are you drunk? You're going to a Motel 6. The insult was reflexive, a desperate attempt to regain control of a scene that was rapidly slipping away from her. "No," Marquis said. The word was flat, final. "I'm going home." He paused, letting the two simple words hang in the air between them, redefining the entire context of their conversation. He then delivered the first blow to my new home. The $4 million one in Paradise Valley. He saw the information register in her eyes. It wasn't belief yet. It was cognitive dissonance. The numbers didn't compute. $4 million? Paradise Valley? It was as if he had claimed he was going to the moon. "The one I paid for in cash 3 weeks ago," he added, each word a hammer, blow against the fragile structure of her reality. Her mouth opened slightly. No sound came out. The smugness was gone, replaced by a dawning, horrified confusion. You're lying," she stammered. It wasn't a statement, it was a plea. She needed him to be lying. "Am I?" he asked, his voice still unnervingly calm. He gestured to the key fob on the counter. "These are mine." He then turned his gaze back to her, and his eyes were as cold and hard as the granite countertop. "As for you," he said, his voice dropping into that devastatingly quiet register, "you get yours." He let the line breathe, forcing her to focus on it. "We have a prenuptial agreement, remember?" he asked softly. He saw the flash of panic in her eyes. She remembered. Her lawyer had likely dismissed it as something that could be challenged, a minor hurdle. "You and I both signed it. It's very clear. You are entitled to half of all marital assets accumulated during our time together." He saw a flicker of hope in her expression. The house, the cars, the accounts. She still believed they were marital assets. He extinguished that hope with his next sentence, "which amounts to half of the $12,450 currently in our joint checking account." He watched her process the number. $12,450. Half of that was $6,225. It wasn't enough to cover one of her shopping trips. It wasn't enough to cover a single month's lease payment on her Porsche. "What about the house?" she whispered, her voice hoarse. "My father, the down payment." "The house is owned by an LLC, which is owned by my company," Marquis stated, dismantling her reality brick by brick. "You are not on the title. You never were. The car you drive is leased by my company. The credit cards you use are corporate cards." He delivered the final, crushing blow. "The prenup explicitly states that Phoenix Saguaro Holdings and all its assets are my sole and separate property. You agreed to that." "Phoenix Saguaro Holdings?" She repeated the name, her voice barely audible. The name meant nothing to her. It was just a random string of words. "My company," he said simply. "The one I own. The one you thought was just some mid-size firm I worked for as an analyst." The full, catastrophic truth finally crashed down upon her. The blood drained from her face. Her carefully constructed tan seemed to turn a sickly, ashen gray. Her hands began to tremble. This wasn't just a divorce. This was an annihilation. The man she had mocked, belittled, and planned to discard was not a lowly analyst. He was a king who had been living among them, disguised as a peasant, and she had just tried to banish him from a kingdom that he owned entirely. "No," she whispered. "No, no, no." Marquis felt a pang, not of pity, but of a deep, profound sadness for the waste of it all. The years they had lost, the love that had been a mirage. But he did not waver. He took his phone out of his pocket and sent a single, pre-written text to his CFO, Maria. It said, "Now." Miles away, Maria hit 3 buttons. The corporate American Express card in Alicia's $8,000 Chanel wallet was instantly declined. An email was sent to the Porsche dealership's repossession department. A wire transfer for millions of dollars moved, leaving exactly $12,450 behind. Marquis put his phone back in his pocket. He looked at the woman who was now, for all intents and purposes, a stranger. Her face was a mask of pure horror. He turned and walked away, leaving the keys to his new life on the counter of his old one. He didn't run. He walked with the steady, unhurried pace of a man who knows exactly where he is going. He heard a choked sob behind him, then a scream of pure, impotent rage. He didn't look back. He walked out the front door, down the stone pathway, and past her white Porsche Macan, a beautiful, expensive cage she was about to be evicted from. He got into his black Ford Raptor, parked just down the street, its powerful engine rumbling to life with a satisfying growl. He pulled away from the curb, leaving the house on Camelback Mountain behind for good. As he drove, his phone began to ring. It was her. He ignored it. A text came through, then another, then a flood of them. The voicemail icon appeared. He didn't look. He just drove, the setting sun in his rearview mirror, his face set like stone, heading toward the quiet, waiting sanctuary of his new home in Paradise Valley. The strike was over. The fallout was just beginning. The consequences cascaded, not in a single tidal wave, but in a series of precise, devastating blows that dismantled Alicia's life piece by piece. For Marquise, the weekend was one of serene, quiet unpacking. For Alicia, it was a slow-motion collapse. Consequence 1. The immediate financial freeze. Friday, 6:47 p.m. After Marquise left, Alicia, in a blind panic, grabbed her purse and ran to her Porsche. Her first instinct was to flee, to go somewhere expensive and comforting. She drove to the nearest high-end bar at the Biltmore, ordered a $45 glass of champagne, and tried to pay with her Amex. The card was declined. She tried it again. Declined. The bartender looked at her with a mixture of pity and suspicion. Flushed with shame, she fumbled for her debit card, the one linked to their joint account. It worked, but the tiny act of using it instead of the prestigious black card felt like a profound demotion. She left the bar, the champagne untouched, a cold knot of dread tightening in her stomach. Consequence 2. The voicemail and text escalation. All weekend, her messages painted a portrait of a mind unraveling. Friday, 7:10 p.m. Voicemail. Marquise, pick up the phone. This is insane. You can't just do this. That was a joke, what I said. A joke. Call me back right now. Tone. Angry. Demanding. Friday, 9:30 p.m. Text. My card was declined. Did you do that? Turn it back on. This isn't funny. Saturday, 11 a.m. Voicemail. Okay, I get it. You're mad. You have a right to be. I was cruel. I'm sorry. But turning off my cards, taking everything? Marquise, you can't be that person. You're a good man, the man I married. Please, just come home. We can talk about this. Tone, pleading, manipulative. Saturday, 4 p.m. Text. Where are you? Are you really in some mansion? I don't believe you. You're trying to scare me. It's working. Please just call me. Sunday, 2:15 p.m. Voicemail crying. I drove by the house. The real estate listing. The one I showed you. It says sold. Was that you? Oh my God, what have I done? Marquis, I love you. I've always loved you. I was just scared, insecure. Please, please don't do this to me, to us. Tone, desperate, hysterical. Marquis listened to them once, his face impassive, then forwarded the audio files to his lawyer, David. Each message was another confirmation that he had made the only possible choice. Consequence 3. The legal reality, Monday, 9 a.m. A sleek black sedan pulled up to the Camelback house. A courier delivered a thick envelope. Inside were the divorce papers, filed that morning in Maricopa County Superior Court. The petition was simple, citing irreconcilable differences. Attached was a copy of the prenuptial agreement. Alicia spent the morning on the phone, frantically calling divorce attorneys. The first three she spoke to, all top-tier lawyers in Scottsdale, gave her the same grim prognosis after she emailed them the prenup. "This is ironclad," one told her, his voice devoid of sympathy. "It was drafted by a top firm. Your husband's assets are completely shielded. You can try to fight it, but you'll be spending your settlement money on legal fees, and you will lose." Her settlement, $6,225. Consequence 4. The humiliation of repossession. Tuesday, 11:30 a.m. Alicia was in the living room, surrounded by packing boxes she hadn't touched, when the doorbell rang. It was two men in polo shirts with the logo of a tow company. "Ma'am, we're here for the Porsche Macan," the lead man said, holding a clipboard. "The lease is in default." "Default? That's impossible," she stammered. "Lease is held by Saguaro Holdings. They terminated the agreement. We just need the keys, ma'am." Her neighbors were outside, walking their dogs, watering their plants. They watched as Alicia, her face a mask of shame, handed over the keys. They watched as her beautiful white $80,000 Porsche was hoisted onto a flatbed truck and driven away, leaving an oil stain on the pristine driveway and a gaping hole in her social identity. She was now the woman whose car got repossessed. Consequence 5. The eviction. The divorce filing included a formal notice to vacate the property at 123 Mountain View Lane within 30 days. The house she had believed was her greatest asset was now just a rental she was being kicked out of. She had to use her meager settlement to hire a moving company and find an apartment. She ended up in a 700-square-foot one-bedroom unit in a sprawling complex in Tempe, near the university. The rent was $1,800 a month. Her new view was of a parking lot and a dumpster. The Roche-Beaubois sofa she had ordered? She had to cancel it, forfeiting the $22,000 deposit she had paid with the now-defunct corporate card. The company refused to refund it. Consequence 6. The social collapse. The news of the divorce and her spectacular downfall spread through her social circle like wildfire. The friends who had once admired her lifestyle now gossiped about her misfortune. The invitations to galas, brunches, and weekend trips stopped coming. Tiffany, the friend from the dinner party, didn't return her calls. When Alicia was forced to sell her designer handbags and shoes on luxury consignment sites to pay her bills, her last vestiges of status vanished. She had built her identity on a foundation of wealth and exclusivity, and with that gone, she found she had nothing left. She was no longer Alicia, the Queen of Camelback. She was just a woman in a small apartment in Tempe, surrounded by the ghosts of a life she had destroyed with her own two hands. The consequences weren't an act of revenge from Marquis. They were simply the bill for her choices, finally coming due. A year passed. The relentless phoenix sun rose and set, healing the scorched earth and, in its own way, a scorched heart. Marquis stood on the summit of Camelback Mountain, the same mountain he had once lived on in quiet misery. It was 7 a.m. on a crisp Saturday morning. The air was cool and clear, and the city sprawled below him, a glittering tapestry of promise. He took a long drink from his water bottle, his breathing steady, his body strong from months of these pre-dawn hikes. He wasn't looking down at the city with the eyes of a conqueror, but with the quiet gratitude of a survivor. His new life in the Paradise Valley mansion was nothing like his old one. It was a life of authenticity. The silence in the house was not the heavy, oppressive silence of an unhappy marriage, but the peaceful, restorative silence of a sanctuary. He had friends over for barbecues by the pool, real friends who had known him for years, friends who had seen him through the worst of it. They drank cheap beer and expensive whiskey, and their laughter echoed in the open spaces. They talked about business, about life, about everything and nothing. They never once asked what his house cost. He had thrown himself into his work at Saguaro Holdings, not as an escape, but with a renewed sense of purpose. The company was thriving, breaking ground on a new $50 million sustainable community development in North Scottsdale. But the success felt different now. It wasn't a secret to be guarded, but a resource to be shared. 6 months after the divorce was finalized, he launched the Saguaro Fellowship. It was a mentorship program for aspiring Black and minority real estate brokers and developers from underprivileged backgrounds in Phoenix. He took on an inaugural class of 10 fellows, giving them office space, a salary, and most importantly, his time. He taught them everything he knew: how to analyze a deal, how to negotiate, how to build a network. He taught them the things no one had taught him. He saw his own hunger, his own drive, reflected in their young, eager faces. His office, the real one in the glass tower, was now a vibrant, collaborative space. The fellows were there every day, their energy infectious. One of them, a brilliant 22-year-old woman named Kayla, had a particular talent for architectural design. She would often leave little sketches on his desk, ideas for community gardens or public spaces in their new developments. One afternoon, he came back to his desk to find a small, framed drawing. It was a simple, charcoal sketch of his house in Paradise Valley. But in the foreground, it wasn't just him. It was a group of people, the fellows, all standing with him, laughing. In the sky above, Kayla had drawn a massive, smiling saguaro cactus, its arms outstretched as if to embrace them all. At the bottom, she had written in neat script, "Home isn't a place, it's a purpose. Thank you, Marquis." He picked up the frame, his fingers tracing the lines of the drawing. His throat felt tight. This was worth more than the $4 million he'd paid for the house. This was real wealth. This was the return on an investment in people. He had one final encounter with Alicia. It was 6 months ago. His lawyer, David, had called him. Alicia had been trying to get his address, claiming she needed to send him something. David had refused. A week later, she had simply shown up at the Saguaro Holdings office tower. The front desk security, following protocol, had called up to him. He agreed to see her, asking them to show her to a small, neutral conference room on the ground floor. He walked in and saw a woman he barely recognized. The designer clothes were gone, replaced by simple, generic jeans and a t-shirt. Her hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail. She looked smaller, diminished. "Marquise?" she said, her voice quiet. "Thank you for seeing me." "Alicia," he said, nodding. He remained standing. I just wanted to apologize," she said, her eyes fixed on the table. "For everything. For how I treated you. For what I said. You were right. I built my whole life on things that didn't matter, on showing off. And when it was all gone, I realized I had nothing. No real friends, no purpose." She finally looked up at him, her eyes shining with unshed tears. "I'm in therapy. I'm working at a coffee shop. I'm starting over. And I'm sorry. I truly am." Marquis listened. He didn't feel anger. He didn't feel triumph. He felt a distant, quiet sadness. He thought of the years wasted, the potential for a real partnership that had been squandered on her vanity and his fear. "I accept your apology, Alicia," he said, and he meant it. Forgiving her wasn't for her benefit, it was for his. It was the final act of letting go, of releasing the last ghost from his new home. "I wish you peace." He turned and walked out of the conference room without looking back. Now standing on the mountain, he looked toward the east, where the sun was climbing higher, bathing the valley in a clean, golden light. He thought about that child's drawing, or rather the young woman's drawing, sitting on his desk. He finally understood. For years, he had tried to buy love by hiding his wealth, and Alicia had tried to build a life by chasing it. They were both wrong. True wealth isn't about the price tag on your house or the brand of your car. It's not something you can hide or flaunt. Real wealth is purpose. It's the people you invest in. It's the community you build. It's the quiet satisfaction of knowing you are living a life that is authentically, unapologetically your own. It's the freedom to stand on top of a mountain, look at the world you helped build, and feel not pride, but peace. We all build our lives around what we value. Some of us chase illusions, while others build legacies. What do you believe is the foundation of a truly wealthy life? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and let's continue this conversation about what truly matters.